Well, the starting point is that we're blind. We have a blind spot to the issue of money. And this has a long, long history. All patriarchal societies in history have imposed a monopoly of money which is scarce and which has interest. In other words, it's a concentration tool. On the other hand, all matrifocal societies, societies that honor feminine values, always had multiple currency systems. In matrifocal societies, you had one currency to deal with foreigners that you don't know, which is identical to the patriarchal currency, and a second currency where the rules are exactly different, which is for exchanges within your community. So that's the first layer. The second layer has been the Industrial Revolution, and with the both the communist and the capitalist system have both used the same money system. Bank debt money with interest. In communist states, basically you had governments owning the banks, while in the capitalist system, private sector was owning the banks. But the system is the same. And I believe they are the same because they were both born in a patriarchal environment. Then that's the second layer. The third layer is sometime in the 19th century, the banking system has actually decided that the best way to keep the system going is to institutionalize the status quo. That's why central banks were created. Their job is to keep the system as is. There's one rule: never touch the money system. You can touch anything else, but not money. For example, the Nobel Prize of Economics is not really a Nobel Prize, and it is funded by the Central Bank of Sweden, and the decisions for the candidates are chosen by the board of the Central Bank. So it's an institution that is in charge of the status quo. One is not supposed to talk about it. And there has not been, notwithstanding the big crisis, everything is, you don't touch this one with the system. You just recover it, you restore it, so we can go back to where it was. I claim that the instability of the money system is due to its lack of diversity. It is structural, and we have the evidence from it from nature. Natural ecosystems, a forest, and economics have rules that obey on the same level. So if I were to declare that we find one type of tree, pine tree, we make illegal any other kind of tree and replace it with pines only everywhere, it's a recipe for disaster. And this is not a metaphor. This is not a parallel. The rules behind it, the structural rules are the same. You need diversity in interactions. Otherwise, you are very vulnerable to any instability. The solution is not to get rid of conventional money, obviously. What is necessary is to complete it. We need to get rid of the monopoly of that currency. In other words, there are specialized currencies, we already have that, but small scale, that actually can deal with specific issues and that are not necessarily bank debt money. We can create other kinds of currencies for other purposes. We have a massive problem with the environment, with ecological systems, and if we believe we can solve that only with regulation on one side and with subsidies by governments on the other side, I think we're completely naive. There is a way for governments to actually issue a currency that is for environmental work and require a tax to be paid in that currency. That money doesn't have to be bank debt money. The government can actually raise the tax, an environmental tax, in an environmental currency. I'm working on a project in Japan where there is a lake area, and anything that pollutes the lake and requires work, there will be activities that people can earn that currency, that special new currency. Now, if you have someone who doesn't want to do anything, in that environmental work, that's fine. But at the end of the year, he needs to buy from people who have done the work the units that he needs. And that actually gives another economy, which is not part of the budget of the government because the government is creating the currency. That's one way, an example of a solution. Another example, employment issues. The problem of employment is that small and medium-sized businesses are actually the ones who employ 70 to 90% of all private business, all private jobs. Small and medium-sized businesses have a systematic problem with cash flow. When they buy something, they have to pay cash for it 30 days. When they sell something, they're paid 90 days or longer. When they go to the bank says, we're not interested because you're too small. So we can actually solve the problem by creating a network of businesses. If I'm a small, medium-sized business, I introduce an invoice in 90 days into the system, have it insured, and we issue a currency of the network with which I can pay, which doesn't have interest, but which I can pay my suppliers now, without waiting for 90 days. So here's a mechanism to solve unemployment. A third example, already applicable in Japan, aging of society. More and more help is needed for elderly people to be able to function, including things that are not medical. The solution has been in Japan to create a currency for that purpose. There are 487 systems that are operational now. They're called Furiakipu. And the unit of account is an hour. And anything that's not covered by the national health care can be paid in that currency. If I'm providing such a service, I obtain such units. It's all electronic. And with that, I can actually get similar services myself. You know, anything that's not covered by national health care. Or I can send my credits that I'm earning that way to my mom, so someone takes care of her. There are 487 systems like that operational in Japan today. I think we have something to learn. If you try to do this with national money that the government has to borrow from the banking system in order to be able to pay, it's not going to work. So these are all examples. Give you, different fields require different specialized units of account, so you can actually design economies that work in a loop for specific purposes. And that is what we do in a forest. In a forest you have loops that are being created. They do not have one single thing. One single tree that does everything. One single animal that does everything. We have lots of different levels, small, medium, large. All that diversity is actually what provides the resilience to the system. So when one of these things get in trouble, the other ones can adapt and take over.